welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm your host, Shelby Novak, and I'm here to read you a bedtime story. Before I get into this week's episode, I wanted to tell you about 2 projects I worked on that you can find now. I was asked to be a part of the most recent Let's Not Meet live stream, and you can catch the audio of that on the most recent episode of Let's Not Meet. I believe you can also find the video of the live stream. I did a fun little thing where I took you on a car ride with me on Twitch, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But if you are a patron of Let's Not Meet, it is available on the Patreon. I do know that for sure. I was also cast as several roles in the new Dead Space podcast. I love the video game franchise, so this was such a cool opportunity. Listen for me in the first episode, and from there, I play a few different parts sprinkled about the series, and that is Dead Space Deep Cover. Both that and Let's Not Meet are available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, into this week's story. I have for you a story by author Lee Rozelle, whose story Lyle and the Spaceman you may remember from episode 70 way back in 2019. Well, Lee has a book available right now called Backwaters. This is one of those stories. The whole book is filled with his brilliant writing. His work is terrifying and odd in the best way, and I will put a link to Backwaters in the show notes. So here, this will hopefully urge you to go get yourself a copy of Backwaters. This is Lord of the Fishes. All but gone are the slick-headed preachers, the healers, the strong men of God, who sent 50 missionaries at a time south of the border to hand out bifocals, pull teeth, and perform Bible-themed wrestling extravaganzas to stunned crowds. This past year, 4 of the Talapucci community's most prominent church leaders have met their maker. The first to die was Pastor Donnie Ledoux. He drowned performing a baptism in Lake Gwynn. The reservoir, they say, snatched him under and sucked him through the spillway grates. 6 days later, Brother Bartholomew blew the top of his head off in a duck hunting accident. Then, last month, Father Fitzhugh died on the 13th hole of the country club of a self-inflicted golf club wound. In light of these deaths, the church found itself in crisis mode when Pastor Betty Fay fell from the top deck of a Carnival cruise ship into the Gulf of Mexico. And though Betty Fay retired from the pulpit years ago, she'd kept herself active by teaching Hatha Yoga 3 times a week at the church gymnasium. The loose-jowled revivalist was scheduled to teach a class on the Monday after her vacation. She never made it. She never even made it to the captain's dinner on the cruise ship because, at the time, amberjacks were picking out her eyes as she drifted end over end along the Mesoamerican reef. Hearing the tragic news about Pastor Betty Fay, the church activities coordinator scrambled to find a replacement yoga instructor until, like a good omen, a single job app popped into the church's inbox at the stroke of midnight. The following Monday, 2 weeks after Pastor Betty Fay's plunge, the small class waited in the church Zumba room to meet their new yoga teacher. The students sat on mats with their legs crossed, whispering back and forth about Betty Fay's empty casket funeral. Irene Fredericks, a gregarious woman in her late 50s with kinky orange hair, did shoulder rotations and chattered with Sister Amy, a gaunt grandmother in a spangled unitard. Brother Chester, who recently suffered a mild heart attack, bent over his gut holding a blue strap around the bottom of his feet as hot air whistled from his knotted nose. Fretfully, he glanced at the muscled body of Maxine, a pumped attorney with newly crowned teeth, as she held a perfect plank. "What's this about a new teacher?" asked Irene. "I heard she had a facelift." "Shh." Sister Amy poked a thumb at the door. A woman who could have been 40 or 20 came in carrying a lava lamp under her arm. Brother Chester was transfixed by her flowing red curls. Irene marveled at her piercing, Sprite bottle green eyes, and Sister Amy noted her pixie face and wrinkled, thick-veined hands. Behind her, stutter-stepped a bald and toothless young man wearing a blue blazer over an Omega Lambda Epsilon t-shirt and a pair of soiled gray sweatshorts, his bony legs jutting from loose trunks like ivory canes, the savage stench of ranky flesh emanating from his body in waves made the mirrored room a ripe imbroglio of mixed emotions. Instead of a yoga mat, the boy appeared to be carrying under his arm a rolled-up plastic sucker-bottomed pad from a motel bathtub. He unrolled it with a resounding pop and wedged up front between Maxine and Brother Chester. "Sat Nam," said the striking woman as she bowed in Anjali Mudra.
"Sat Nam,"
chimed the class in unison. The new yoga instructor sat facing the group with her eyes closed and hands in prayer. As the class settled into their meditative postures, the malodorous assistant set to work drawing the window shades, plugging in the lava lamp, fiddling with the music, and placing a wooden essential oil diffuser in the corner. "Thank you, Bib," said the new yoga teacher. "I'm Layla. Let's start, everyone, by inviting our breath to slow." As she demonstrated various deep breathing techniques, Indian flutes from a Bluetooth speaker coiled about the air in serpentine thrusts. Slow tabla drums and a plucked sitar graced the aromatherapy fumes of sandalwood and wet earth, while the lava lamp light bulged end over end in the dusky haze. Layla led the class through neck rotations and remedial stretches, then moved from down dog to dolphin and crocodile. Ronnie Weeks, the squattish man in the back corner with a Fu Manchu mustache, let go of his tough guy act and breathed into his pose. His cousin Hannah forgot her boyfriend problems, feeling her face and shoulders loosen. Sister Amy and Irene Fredericks stopped tittering and found themselves in the groove. Only Brother Chester seemed immune, his nose warbling and his teeth gritting as he continued to scrabble and pull at the blue strap around his feet, lined with fungal toenails that looked like brain coral. At the end of class, as the fledgling yogis lay stretched in corpse poses, Layla picked up an acoustic guitar to play. She plucked the strings and swayed, her long red hair falling over her face, as everyone eased into deeper and deeper levels of relaxation. And with it, imaginary petals fell from the ceiling and dropped into their dark ponds of consciousness as the students inhaled the toxic vapors from the sputtering essential oil diffusers. Then, without warning, the rafter lights popped on. The new teacher offered a brisk namaste, and the class staggered from the tabernacle into the stark morning sunshine, their minds blotted and blank from mercury poisoning. On Wednesday, everybody got to the Zumba room early, as Bib once again set up the essential oil diffusers, positioned the wireless speaker, and plugged in the lava lamp. There were new women there, some with bright faces and magnificent hairdos, others from the trailer park. In her paisley yoga pants, Irene tried to get a conversation going with a biology professor named Audrey and her thin colleague, Roger.
Betty Faye's husband is so broke up about her suicide,
Irene scoffed,
that he went out and bought him a Volkswagen Cabriolet convertible, a two-seater.
In a standing back bend, Audrey nodded politely.
Yellow.
Roger closed his eyes and alternated his nostril breathing.
Said he's moving down to Mexico Beach.
Om Namah Shivaya. Layla flicked off the lights. Today we begin in Mountain. This time the music was an ethereal space drone that warbled and repeated at 30,000 hertz. The class stood motionless with its backs straight, hands flat, and arms extended downward, like plastic action figures. Still struggling to get to his feet, Brother Chester stared at the lava lamp, his mouth half cracked. Let us remain standing with our eyes closed. They stood and stood in the ambient music and spiked fumes. For the first 5 minutes, then 10, the oil diffuser in Brother Chester's corner was starting to stink like a dead fish. 15 minutes. With her eyes clamped tight, Irene mindlessly rolled her hips. Roger bit his bottom lip, itching to finger his iPhone. Maxine breathed in and out, like she imagined a tiger would, her tight shoulder muscles rippling. Brother Chester never took his goggled eyes off the hypnotic lava lamp. Sensitive to the vaporous clouds expanding in the mirrored room, Irene began to cough and wheeze. Sister Amy emitted a peal of high-pitched laughter, her head snapping back at warped angles. She covered her nose with her hands, cackling with the sense that some deranged Barbie doll was running circles inside her cranium, pressing buttons and pulling the strings of her analog mind. Then, as if turned off by a light switch, her face went flat, her fingertips and toes tingling as she moved from mountain to tree pose, her right foot resting upon her left calf with a thin knee jutting outwards, palms together at her chest, then over her head. For the first time since childhood, the world felt glorious to Sister Amy. She remained standing tall on one leg, her knee out, her hands and fingers stretched to the open sky, her mind crackling and undulating in neon joy. "Sister," said Brother Chester. Sister Amy squinted one eye toward her husband. The room was empty. Friday's class began with moon salutations. The room was packed with new students, all women, who gleamed in ruddy, if a bit unearthly, health. Eyes closed, Layla said, as the drug-laced diffusers buzzed. Back in the far corner, Ronnie stood in a prayer position, ogling Layla. The new yoga instructor shone, her arms becoming long in Ronnie's mind like water hoses, as she leaned from prayer to half moon. With her palms together over her head, Layla's arms and neck extended to one side and stretched upward into smooth tubes. In the bulbous blue-green light, her skin became fluid and eelsome, and she leaned half-moon to the other side and then cascaded backward into a curling wave. From his corner in star pose, Ronnie blinked in shock as the yoga instructor's shining face appeared to lose contour and stretched sideways. Her form seemed without bone, without elbow or knee, as she flowed one way and another, and then back into the shape of a crescent moon. Then Ronnie heard a wet, smacking sound that made him think of his grandma sucking on a retirement home spare rib, and turned to see the bald and toothless Bib glaring at him with special eyes. Staring at Ronnie, Bib brought a finger slowly across his throat before shifting into cobra pose. "Mercy," said Brother Chester into the fog. Staring straight forward, Ronnie noticed the sleek legs and heart-shaped buttocks of Roger, the geologist. Roger, who maintained a self-involved posture, was stealing glances at a ripped Maxine, whose deep exhalations resembled the bray of an Angus bull. Only after he moved back into Sphinx pose did Ronnie dare glance over at Bib again. As the students got to their knees, Ronnie could not help but notice Bib's pale, barren scrotum dangling from the sides of his loose trunks. Ronnie cat-cowed with mixed feelings as Bib's head twisted rearward. With his face jutting from his shoulder blades, Bib jeered back at Ronnie. "Mercy," said Brother Chester again, who squatted and began a movement with his buttocks that, if done with more rapidity, would be considered twerking. "Stop that," Sister Amy whispered. "Not in church." "Very good," said Layla. "Come back to the breath." Brother Chester gaped at Layla, who, to his surprise, was now glaring right at him with her bright green eyes. "Forget the past if you can." Layla stared down the old man. "The things you've done." For a split second, a flicker, the woman looked familiar to Brother Chester. Then, the lights popped on. "Namaste." Layla smiled again. Ronnie was not in class the following Monday. After recognizing the sensual and complex feelings the asanas had engendered, Ronnie would never take yoga again. Sister Amy and Brother Chester did return, but they were late. Brother Chester had suffered all weekend from heart palpitations and blurred vision. He had also taken to walking with a cane to steady himself. Wide-eyed at the door, Brother Chester and Sister Amy stumbled into the murky room, found a space in the growing crowd, and unrolled their puffy mats. With shuffling legs and quavering lips, the old man bent forward, then crumpled to the exercise room floor. "Cow face with eagle arms," said Layla. "Then, if you are able, Bakasana." "Here comes the pain," whispered Irene. Maxine's steel jaw tightened. Pleadingly, Brother Chester blinked around the dark room with his red-rimmed eyes. Layla demonstrated the first pose by putting one leg over the other in the seated position and then bringing her feet around under her body. With a straight back, she slid one elbow over the other while she coiled her wrists and hands together in a twisted prayer so that both her arms and legs became knots. Maxine and Audrey moved into the convoluted pose with relative ease, but the rest of the class had trouble. Roger's shoulders burned, Sister Amy's knees stung, and Irene could barely feel her root chakra. Shockingly, Brother Chester was in a perfect pose, his arms and legs expertly coiled. By contrast, his face was twisted in hellish agony, with his ancient ligaments wrenched beyond all bounds. The haunted man slid further and further into the pose, his ashen body elegantly aligned, his sweat-drenched cheeks and jowls shaking from the torment. From the corner of his mouth came a small, goatish bleat. "Fantastic," Layla said, as she uncoiled to stand. "Now, for Bakasana, the crow," gasped Roger into the oily smog. Layla squatted, then bent her upper body forward and down, pressing her hands firmly into the mat. She eased her elbows under her knees so that they rested upon her triceps. Sliding her knees over her arms, Layla's feet rose from the ground. In a crouched handstand, she allowed her feet and the legs to elevate a few inches more as she hovered in perfect Bakasana. Maxine and Audrey performed admirable crows, their burning arms a-tremble. After a good bit of maneuvering, Roger was able to manage a modified crow with his forehead resting on a block. Hannah continued to fall face first, catching herself again and again. Irene and Sister Amy squatted like old chimpanzees, their knuckles dragging on the mat. In the diffuser's noxious haze, Brother Chester garbled and sobbed in the corner. His crow was divine. Before Friday's class, Brother Chester refused to get out of the family sedan. In the church parking lot, he clutched the cracked and dusty dash with tears in his eyes. "Get out," Sister Amy growled, her mind still muddled from Wednesday's toxic oils. "This is for your health." Brother Chester shook his head. "Get out!" Sister Amy struck at him with his cane. Wiping his face with his handkerchief, an angry red knot rising on his forehead, Brother Chester pulled himself from the car and staggered behind his wife under the shadow of the white steeple. "Welcome," Layla said as Brother Chester and Sister Amy entered the Zumba room. They scuttled across the crowded space like bugs in a dusky fog bank. "There's still a little space up front." When they were finally seated on their mats, Layla stood. "Breath of fire," she said as she raised her arms. In unison, the growing mass of students raised their hands and began to pant heavily, the air bursting in and out of their noses in rapid succession. To Brother Chester, who glanced in terror from face to distorted face, they sounded like tormented hounds and snuffling swine of the blistering pits of Gehenna, staring forward at the horrible blobbing lamp, sucking up the diffuser's mutagenic fumes. Brother Chester's third eye fluttered and blinked open. Only then did he start to remember. Brother Chester began to see. He remembered Guatemala, the way a thin wrist snaps when you twist it. He saw slick-headed preachers panting and wheezing over small bodies on the communion table, crucifix necklaces swinging like pendula to the sounds of incantations and screams, lucha masks and blue-veined serpents in wicked circles reciting psalms, beetles and locusts heaving under white bed sheets. Brother Chester saw the dentist's pliers, hairy-chested men
wearing shiny wrestling masks and an opened Bible. And he knew that he, the respected and beloved Brother Chester, was one of their number. He was one of the pastors wrestling the children to the ground, bugs like pitch black paint spreading down the high ceiling walls. A girl deep in a lagoon. And in that instant, Brother Chester could delude himself no more. He remembered Layla. He remembered all of it. He saw what they had done. What he had done. Eyes closed, everyone, said Layla. Keep going. Breath of fire. The first stroke was a revelation. It was a small one, a tiny belch along the blood-brain barrier that took away Brother Chester's ability to pray, and then to scream. Now rapidly inhaling and exhaling with the class, Brother Chester bent to pick up his yoga strap. He wrapped it around and around his own throat. Brother Chester pulled the strap tight, his arms making a quivering cross. As he strangled himself, his blue tongue jittering, Layla shone in his mind like glowing fire. And then, in the circle of fog, came the second stroke. Brother Chester fell to the yoga mat with a wet thump. And now, for my favorite pose of all, said Layla. Lord of the fishes. All but gone are the slick-headed preachers, the healers, the strong men of God, who sent 50 missionaries at a time south of the border to hand out bifocals, pull teeth, and perform Bible-themed wrestling extravaganzas to the stunned crowds. This past year, 5 of Tallapoochee community's most prominent church leaders have met their Maker. Thanks for listening, and thank you so much to Lee Rozelle for giving me the opportunity to read this incredible, amazing story on my show. And please go pick up your copy of Backwaters. Again, I will put the link in the show notes, and I have a link for Amazon, and I think you can find it elsewhere too, but I have the Amazon link. So go check that out, and thank you, Lee. Thank you for your great story. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at scareyoutosleep. And you can follow me personally at Shelby B. Scott on those same platforms. If you have a story that you'd like to be considered for the show, please send it to scareyoutosleep@gmail.com, and it will go into my little folder, and I will consider it for the show. And if it's a true story, please put true story in the subject line. If it's fictional, no need to do that. You can just put the title, or you can say fictional story submission. Sure, why not? That would actually be a little helpful, I guess. So, that. And, if you'd like ad-free episodes, I've seen a few people talking about the ads. And, I just wanted to I've addressed it before. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. If you want weekly content, is I've got to have ads on the show. But I do have ad-free episodes available for $1 a month on Patreon, which I think is pretty fair. $1, and I know not everyone can afford $1 a month. I've been there. But that's just what I gotta do. I gotta pay bills too, unfortunately, and and inflation comes for us all. So, speaking of Patreon, I also have a new bonus episode available on Patreon, and it's a newer little series I started, and it's kind of half ramble, half dark Reddit. I basically, for this episode, it won't be for every episode, but for this particular one, I looked up
conspiracies on Reddit, like an Ask Reddit of what's a conspiracy that you believe, and read some conspiracies from Reddit, talked about my ideas and what my favorite conspiracies are, and just had a casual ramble/dark Reddit bonus. So that is available for $3 and up patrons on Patreon right now. So go check that out if you'd like. And as many of you may see in your feed, that earlier this week I released poems about death, and it was a video. It is still a video on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel took a big hiatus this year for various reasons that you're all aware of. I think you're all aware of by now. Still get a few questions every now and then, but I thought it'd be great to have an audio version of that video, and been dealing with death lately, and I enjoyed making that episode. So if you'd like to see the video version, feel free. I did just some there's like an intro by me, and then I did some like B-roll, I guess, of just some pretty things. Clara makes an appearance in it. And yeah, I'm thinking about doing that. I have another poetry episode, a horror poetry episode on YouTube, and I think I'll also make that audio available at some point, because I think it's just nice to have the audio. I noticed a few of my favorite ASMR artists. I noticed some of them are starting to put some of their work as audio only as well, and I was like, that's a great idea. So and it seems like so many of you enjoyed it. So, and I got a lot of messages already from people saying that it really helped them out, and I appreciate. I'm glad I can help in any way. So go check out Poems About Death if you'd like. I think that's all for this week. Did I bake this week? I didn't. That's a lie. I did bake this week. I made cherry almond scones, and they were fantastic. Oh my God, they were so good. Cherry almond scones are my favorite, or scones, as some of you probably call them, but I love them so much. Love cherry almond flavoring. It's amazing. So again, if you'd like that recipe, let me know, and I will send you the recipe I used. And as always, I like to share my recipes. The only thing I didn't have is clotted cream. I'm living in a very small town at the moment, and it is hard to find anything down here. Anything specialty that would be considered specialty. And I didn't feel like making my own. I know you can make your own, but I was like, I want scones now. So, and clotted cream takes quite a while to make. So that's what I made this week, and we'll see what next week brings. And I hope you have, speaking of this episode, one thing I've been wanting to add to the ending, or at least kind of throw in at my ending when I remind you to drink water, is, have you stretched lately? I've been doing a lot more yoga lately, and man, stretching is awesome. It just makes you feel so good. So if you haven't stretched lately, even if you have stretched lately, go do some stretching. It's awesome. It makes you feel all like a rubber band, but in like a good way. It's great. Stretch before bed. I know a lot of people have a good routine of stretching before bed. It's supposed to be good for you before bed, I think. I don't know. That's what they say, whoever they are. And I don't know. I do it in the middle of the day because I sit for work. And so I like to get up and stretch and do a little workout in the middle of the day, because otherwise, I don't want bad circulation. I don't want my legs to fall off, or whatever happens when you get bad circulation. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to go stretch, wear sunscreen, drink water. You deserve it. You deserve the best you. Go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.